occasionally I like to go walking through the bush, and as you can see, there's a lot of lantana, which is an invasive species here in Australia, on my property, and it's just quite useful to have my my Titanium Kukri with me. Of course, chopping the lantana like this does very little to stop the plant. The plant just continues growing, more's the pity. Even extreme weed killers like Roundup and other chemicals like that don't stop it. It eventually grows back because the elements of the plant that remain in the ground, but and then they just continue to grow from then. But as you can see, it's a really useful tool to carry around. Now this of course is really hard wood and possibly some form of iron bark or something like that, but as you can see, it cuts into it without too much effort. It would take me a while to get through that, but I would eventually get through it. Not that that's specifically what the kukri is for, but still a really nice tool to carry around with me when I'm walking around in the bush. And yeah, probably one of the biggest advantages of using the kukri, the Titanium Kukri I should say, is that it requires very little maintenance. So it does require sharpening and that kind of stuff, but it doesn't corrode at all. So after a brief wash, I can take this, use it in the kitchen to chop up my hard vegetables, pumpkins and carrots and stuff like that. So really quite a useful tool. These are the stairs that we've built up to the school property. Looks a bit ramshackle from here, I suppose, but it's a very steep incline, so the steps have to be particularly large. It was quite a bit of work to put them in here. And this area over here that kind of looks a little bit decimated because of the dry and the heat that we've endured here for the last few months. This area, Sherilyn eventually wants to build a like a small labyrinth in this area. It's something she's always wanted.
Hi, Lester, Wushu engineer. I've been meaning for quite some time to do a bit of a follow-up video to my very first video. So the very first video I posted on my Wushu engineer channel, which was on the Titanium Kukri and whether it was the next stage in the evolution of the Kukri design, the Kukri weapon. And so I decided to do that. I'm going to do a bit of a follow-up because it's been a little over a year now that I've been using the Titanium Kukri in and around my property. I've even taken it. I even took it on holiday to South Africa when I went along with some of my students for training purposes last year. And I'll show you a little clip of me doing a bit of a form using the Titanium Kukri. So I'll play that now. So as I said in my first video, one of the main advantages that that the Titanium Kukri gives in terms of its usage as potentially as a weapon is the fact that its weight distribution is different to a standard steel kukri, and because of that, it gives you a little bit more speed in the movements that you can do with it. Where it also doesn't necessarily reduce the ease with which you can chop through objects with it. And that's the primary advantage, but in actual fact, over the last a little bit over a year, I've noticed that there's some other characteristics that have made it quite desirable as just a handy tool to have with me on my property. I live on a 40 acre property, most of which is actually essentially untouched bushland in Queensland. And so occasionally I like to go off walking in the bush on my property, pretending I'm Aragorn or something like that, and it's nice to carry a kukri around with me because there's a lot of vegetation, especially in some places there's quite a lot of invasive vegetation in the form of lantana, and to move through those areas you actually need to be able to cut your way through it, otherwise you get ripped and torn to shreds by the little thorns on the plant. So I use the Titanium Kukri quite a lot for that purpose. And since the original video was made, I completed the build on the Titanium Kukri by actually putting a tungsten carbide coating on one side of the blade, and what that has done, it's done a couple of things to affect the performance of the blade. One of the things that it did do was that in putting the tungsten carbide coating on the one side, the edge, although it's sharp, it's not shaving sharp, so I can't shave with it. And I'm not sure whether you're going to be able to see this, but if I take this piece of cloth and I move it along the blade, you might see that it's sort of sticking to the blade, because in putting that tungsten carbide coating on the one side, what I've done is essentially created a micro serrated edge. So there's very, very, very small serrations, and you can feel it as you run your finger along it, that there are very, very tiny serrations along the edge. Now, of what benefit would that be for a kukri? So I would like to make another video in which I discuss why I believe the kukri design is actually one of the best combat knife designs ever. And I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of love for that video, but some people are so attached to certain things or ways of thinking that if anybody challenges that, they get really upset. So I'm sure I'm going to get a little bit of that, but I'll address that in a different video where I actually look at the engineering aspects of the kukri and why I believe these aspects make it one of the best combat knives ever designed, ever built. But I'm going to focus in this video on just discussing the technical aspects of the Titanium Kukri. So what does the microserration do for you? Well, what it does when you strike objects with it is that the microserrations actually bite into the target and actually prevent the blade from slipping along the target material, whether it's wood or whether it's a chunk of lantana that you're chopping out of the way, or a vegetable that you're chopping in the kitchen. It bites in and transfers in the energy of that impact more effectively into the object, so less slipping. And it also, if you draw it across across something. So I'll just demonstrate it here quickly with this little bit of cloth. If I draw it across, you can see that it actually cuts quite well, just by virtue of the micro serrations. So I believe that that's actually quite a technical evolution in the titanium, in the Kukri. So above and beyond the fact that it's made out of titanium is this fact that it's got micro serrations along the edge, which surprisingly to me even actually really aided its use as a chopping instrument. The other thing that I'll mention about my particular design was actually more like a happy accident, really. I miscalculated the length of the handle, and so the handle is actually a bit longer than it should be. But as I said, it was a little bit of a happy accident because it means that I can shift my grip on the handle for specific purposes. So if I want more sort of more momentum or force or energy in a cutting motion, then I can shift my hand back to the very base of the handle. If I want to kind of make the movement a little bit more, a little bit finer and have more control, I can shift my hand towards the towards the blade. I can potentially even hook the finger around this guard that I've got here, but I tend not to do that. But it's possible. And then if you're holding the knife like this, you're actually essentially right over the point of balance, which is here. So at that point there, you're able to manipulate the knife right about its center of gravity. So I think that's quite an interesting and actually quite utilitarian happy accident that happened to the blade. So in terms of cutting, works very effectively. In terms of just general use, it's really proved itself. Probably one of the things that I mentioned in my clip in the beginning about non-corrosion is that's probably one of the main features that actually makes me want to reach out and take this knife with me rather than one of my steel kukris, because I know that this doesn't require very much maintenance. So if I go out into the bush and I start chopping lantana with it, I know I don't have to rush home and clean the blade and oil it. I can actually leave it and wash it later at my leisure, and it doesn't require any oiling or special care because the titanium doesn't corrode. One of the drawbacks of a titanium blade is the fact that the blade is softer than what you can achieve with hardened steel, and that's mitigated to a certain degree by the tungsten carbide coating on the one side of the blade. But even though there is this tungsten carbide coating, the rest of the blade, so as the blade gets thin towards the edge, that is the main structural component of that is still titanium, which means that if you hit a really hard object with it, like a stone or perhaps some hardened steel, then it is going to ding the blade. So you just have to, or I've just had to, be careful with my use of the weapon. It is a specialized weapon. It is a specialized tool. It's not something that is robust enough to just go smashing through really hard objects like chipping against stone or against hardened steel. But then, as a tool and a weapon, where would that kind of situation really ever occur? Unless you're in some kind of fantasy universe or situation where you're parrying things with the kukri, and in that case anyway, would it really matter, because it's not going to be impinging on the effectiveness of the blade anyway. So all in all, I really, after a year's worth of working and playing around with the Titanium Kukri, I really believe that it is actually one of the steps forward in the Kukri, the evolution of the Kukri as a tool and a combat knife. But I'll talk a little bit more about why I believe the Kukri is potentially one of the greatest combat knife designs ever in a future video. I'm gonna stop this video here, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments, or if you'd like to see more content like this, then just leave a comment in the comment section below. Also, think about subscribing. I don't like begging people, but it does help the channel. I have a number of building projects that I want to kind of get started on, but unfortunately it's been so hot here that I've just not felt like even walking into my workshop, let alone spending time there. The temperature in the workshop has been you know, up in the mid to late 40s on most days for the last few months, so it's just been an unworkable situation. I don't like sitting around in a sweat box. It just takes away your desire to do anything. So hopefully when we start moving into winter, the temperatures are going to drop a little bit, and then I'll be able to do a few more building style projects and building style or at least videos about building projects in the future. Alright, well, I'll see you next time. Cheers.